There's so much airborne matter in any area where human beings are working and living. It's just a simple fact. I mean, when people talk about dirt, for instance, there really is no such thing as dirt. It's kind of this catch-all term we use for fine particles of stuff that kind of aggregate and collect on things. And that's always made out of something. And in an urban environment, it's made out of things like car tires, that are braiding away on the surface of the road. It's made out of bits of brick and masonry, which themselves might, are kind of alkaline. I'm Kristen Chironis, and I'm a sculptor and objects conservator. We're working today on a sculpture that's called Dancers. It's on Washington Avenue in Minneapolis, kind of at 5th Avenue South. Generally speaking, I would say that even in the 23 years that I've been doing this, I would say that, our air quality has deteriorated. The more industry we have, and the more trucks and cars, especially the proximity of highways and dense traffic, the more of these sulfurous kinds of particles are in the air and settling out on things. I talked to you about a sculpture that went up around 1900, and we can watch a photo record of it, looking at a photo taken of the piece every 5 years or so, and it stayed in really good condition for about the first 30 years. Right around 1930 is where you can start to see corrosion developing on the surfaces, and by 1950 it's just ripped, the surface is all ripped down and etched and actively corroding. Well, climate change can mean a lot of different things. And I think most of the time when you hear about it on the news or whatever, people are referring to temperature extremes, either, generally speaking, hotter temperatures, more extreme heat, and then sometimes in Minnesota a little bit more extreme cold. And then they're also talking about these extremes of moisture. If we were to have more tornadoes or hurricanes or things like that, for sure that affects sculptures and is affecting them, globally. Personally, I think of the heat, and that's mainly because, I really don't like the heat, and I work outdoors in the summertime, and it's the last, I would say, 6 summers, except for this year, have been really uncomfortable, unbearable, and I don't like that about, I like Minnesota being a kind of reasonable summer. I like it to be kind of cool, but it makes a person a little bit sad to see that happening.
Kristen's story is not unique. Like many Minnesotans working outdoors, she's concerned about heat. That's why, after each of the 6 stories you're about to see, we asked for feedback from a select group of climate experts. We wanted their reactions, both to the stories we were collecting and the themes they represent.
The trick about climate change is they are gases you can't see with your eyes, but they are emitted with the same processes that emit soot, and so there's a lot of similarities. So the analogy of soot to carbon dioxide is a really good analogy to help people visualize that we are putting these pollutants into the atmosphere.
If greenhouse gases and CO2 coated everything in purple, we probably would have solved this 50 years ago. The thing that makes climate change so challenging is that you can't see the pollution. It's clear, it's colorless, it's odorless. It's the waste gases of progress.
The same thing was true of tailpipes. Right? When we could see the pollution coming out of tailpipes in the 60s and 70s, and we could see the smog, we could cut the smog, right? That made people do something. And so how do you make these other gases visible in the same way that soot is real on a sculpture?
A lot of the sources that contribute the sulfur dioxide, the particulate matter, the other things that she was cleaning off of that sculpture are also at the same time generating carbon dioxide. And so by reducing those sources, we're reducing both simultaneously.
And we've been using the atmosphere as a sewer since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. We've been poking at the climate system with a long, sharp, carbon-based stick, and then acting surprised when the weather bites back. And the weather has been biting back with increasing ferocity, increasing frequency.
You know, I think climate change, it really brings into relief all the systems we live in, because we're starting to see these little changes happening. You know, the increase of temperature, the different ways that particulate matter both affect, you know, air quality, but we see it in soil systems quite a bit, that we're losing soil with great flooding events. We're kind of seeing that we have to dredge more often. I mean, there's all of these little functional things that are happening, but they really are a piece of this bigger picture, that we have integrated systems that we depend on, and even those pieces we may not understand, I think we're starting to realize that they exist.
Extreme heat is an issue for everyone who works outdoors, and if we look at the trends, we're supposed to have a major heat wave once every 10 years that lasts upwards of 10 days. And so this is something we need to get used to, and so we need to change the way we work in the summertime in those conditions, and that might mean shortening our days, working early mornings, later evenings. Our nights are also not going to be cooler. So we have these long, beautiful days of sunlight, but it also means it takes that much longer for the heat to dissipate. And so I think all of us just need to treat that, the way we live our lives in the summer differently than we have in the past.